Dad always made time for vacations with the family. If he didn't have the money, he would borrow the money. And we took extended vacations in Florida. We'd stay a week on the farm, my uncle's farm, and a week at the beach. But his agenda was not a vacation agenda. He would get us up before daylight and said, let's get in some of that early bass fishing. After the sun came up, he said, they're not biting now, let's go play golf. After we played golf and had lunch, he said, let's go back out and catch some of that late evening fishing. That big old bass is waiting on us. After supper, it was Scrabble until midnight. We'd do this day after day after day. We actually had to come home to rest. He never understood the word relax. He lived hard, he prayed hard, he preached hard, and right up until the very end, he was going strong. In fact, at the age of 82, when most people have retired long since, he wanted to launch a website. He wanted to be preaching 24/7 on the web, which he's doing today. He wouldn't retire. With the help of good, dear friends, Larry and Daryl Petrie, he launched his ministry. He's on GodTube, YouTube, any tube you want to name out there, he's on it. And have you ever tried to teach an 82-year-old man who's never picked up a computer how to use one? I mean, it's difficult enough for some of us, but the question is like, how do you turn it off? I can get it turned on, but how do you turn it off? I've lost all my emails. Where are they? How do you make the print larger? I can't see now. On and on and on. But it was my pleasure to, those were interesting weeks that we went through. One day, several years ago, Dad was diagnosed with large cell lymphoma of the spleen. Doctor says it has to come out. There's no choice. So he went through the operation. I was there at the hospital early the next morning to visit him, see how he was. The doctor came in the room and says, you've got to get him up and walk. I said, get him up and walk? I said, you've just cut him open and taken out his spleen. He said, he has to do it. Said, we can't risk any blood clots. So I said, okay, I'll help him. I called in an orderly to help me. I got under one arm, the orderly got under the other. He was hooked to an IV. So here we went. And he starts taking steps, and he was chugging like a steam engine. He's doing his arms like this. But before we hit the doorway, he burst into song. At the top of his voice, God leads his dear children along. Some through the water, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. I mean, it was loud and it was awful. I'm glad he called him to preach and not to sing. But we started down the hallway. I have to be honest, I was a little bit embarrassed. Maybe a whole lot embarrassed. People began looking, patients were getting out of bed and looking out in the hallway to see what was going on. Doctors stopped in their track. Nurses were saying, oh my. Then he got to that part, pushing along. In the night season, and all the day long, God gives a song. And I thought, that's what it's all about. He's reached that limit of stress in his life where he's so full of the Spirit of God that it just has to come out. And I no longer was embarrassed. I was thinking, this is the greatest solo I've ever heard in my life. Took him back to the room. Days later, sitting Sunday morning at Westmore, I was sitting there reflecting on what had happened when he was in the hospital. There he had told me, son, he said, I may not make it. He said, but if I don't make it, he said, I've had enough scholarships and honors in my life. He said, I don't want you to worry about that. He said, just smother me with flowers. He said, my favorite flower is a rose. I was thinking about all this. I thought, well, I'd like to know the words of that song. I'm going to read it. And I reached at random, and I picked a psalm book up from under the bench. I began flipping through it, and a Church of God tithe envelope fell out in my lap. there wasn't any money in it, so I flipped it over and looked on the back, and on it, someone had sketched this beautiful rose. The artist was so proud of it that he signed it, and he placed it back in the songbook. Now, I'm sure that this artist had no idea when he sketched this rose that it was for my dad, and it would be his last rose here on earth. But I'm just as sure that God did.
Would you stand with us? We've heard how Dr. Hughes not only loved preaching, but he loved singing. He loved to sing. One of his favorite things to do was to have a big crowd like this and to have a wonderful choir like this sing along with him. Songs of testimony, songs of worship and praise. So I want to invite you, let's just do that together here today, this big crowd and this choir, and we'll sing along with Dr. Hughes as well. In shady green pastures so rich and so sweet, God leads his dear children along. Where the water's cool flow bathes the weary one's feet, God leads his dear children along. Some through the water, some through the flood, some through the fire, sorrow, but God gives a song in the night season and all the day long. Some through the water, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. Some through great sorrow, but God gives a song in the night season and all the day long. At the cross, where I